This is from Oklahoma. So it turns out there was a guy in the Oklahoma legislature who retired early or whatever. So there's a special election taking place this Tuesday to take his spot. It's the primary election. Actually, I take that back. No, it's the election to fulfill a seat in the Oklahoma State Senate. And the guy who won the Republican nomination for that seat, his name is Dusty Deevers, which is a hell of a name. Dusty Deevers. And if you go to his website right now, he's encouraging everyone, hey, vote December 12th. That's Tuesday. Sorry for the weirdness there. He wants everyone to vote for him, support him for Senate. He's a pastor, a fighter, a businessman, which are three things I don't need in a politician. I just need someone who knows how policy works and actually cares about it. But you get his brand. He's a Republican in Oklahoma. Of course, pastor, he thinks, is the qualification he needs to do the job or something. But the reason I bring this up is he apparently, because he is a pastor, he gave a sermon a year ago where he talked about the horror that is, what is it? In vitro fertilization. That's what he was railing against. And just by way of background, IVF is the procedure where basically a sperm and an egg are fused outside the body, like in a laboratory dish. And the people who take advantage of that are couples who struggle with infertility or other health issues. The concern for the anti-abortion crowd is that if you go through IVF, there may be embryos that are not then implanted back into the uterus. And what do they do with those embryos? Well, they might put them in a freezer, or they might discard them altogether because, oh, we have one that works. We're good. We don't need the rest of these. And so they believe that is abortion, that is tantamount to murder. So that is what Dusty Deevers was speaking about. And this was at a church, I don't know, like an hour away from where he lives. Let me play you that clip, and we'll talk about it after he's done talking. Pay close attention to the language he uses to describe those IVF embryos I just talked about.
Today, I want to ask and answer the question, what must you and I do to love our IVF embryonic neighbors as ourselves? My aim today is, with our Creator's help, graciously to bring before your conscience the harsh realities of IVF so you will respond by faith, in faith, by loving your embryonic neighbor. Why should this matter to you? Well, we've heard why it should matter. Millions of our embryonic neighbors unnecessarily are being led to slaughter every year by IVF and assisted reproductive technologies, and countless others are cryo-incarcerated in frozen prisons. We are creating cryo-orphans for the sake of biological offspring. Saints, our longing to bear children with our own DNA must not lead us to treat our embryos in a way that God forbids. Is your longing to bear children in your own image leading you to flirt with means of procreation that fail to uphold the sacredness of human life, that would lead these embryos or your children to death or a freezer, or deliver them up to destructive experimentation in the name of science? If discontentment is driving you to accept the destruction or freezing of your own embryonic children, you are waging an assault against God, your Creator. And you're doing it through His image bearers. Is He not better than 10,000 children who look like you and carry your DNA? He is.
Yep, that's a guy who's about to get elected to the Oklahoma legislature. Let me recap some of the terminology he used there. First of all, those embryos that don't have names or faces or have replicated or anything, they are our embryonic neighbors, We must love our embryonic neighbors unless they become gay when they're older. He said they are cryo-incarcerated. That's not the word he said because he didn't know the word, but that is what he was getting at. They are cryo-incarcerated in frozen prisons. We are creating cryo-orphans to have kids. He said anyone who uses IVF is waging an assault against God. And you're doing it through embryos that look like God. And then he says, isn't God better than 10,000 children who look like you and carry your DNA? Which, by the way, how many kids does he think IVF parents are having here? 10,000 is quite the number. Um, just to be clear, there are plenty of Christians who will tell you they have benefited from science and IVF, and they are blessed and they have children because of that technology and what they're able to do with it. They don't see themselves as fighting against God or waging an assault on God. That's weird. Like the thing all of these people who are anti-abortion and they're like the fetus matters before it's even viable and like the egg matters or whatever, every sperm is sacred as Monty Python put it. Like they always care about fetuses and embryos. Why? Because they don't need anything. They don't need you. They're not challenging you. They're not like older people who might have an opinion or take a position you don't like. You don't have to feed them. You don't have to worry about them. They don't exist. So it's easy to say you're on their side. Notice how Dusty Deevers here acts when it comes to anyone. I mean, you know what conservative Christians are like. What happens when those people grow up and they are progressive or they are gay or trans? Like, does he give a shit about them? Of course he doesn't. This is a guy who's, I'll show you this in a second, his entire, look at his website here. He is all about, this is his issues page. What is he like here? Second Amendment. He loves guns because if those embryos grow up to be humans and someone shoots them, he's on the side of guns. Veterans, military, that's fine. Parents' rights. Because if your parent wants to suppress you, oppress you in any way, he doesn't like COVID-19 mandates because if you die, he would rather you die and suffer from a disease than have to get vaccinated. Of course, he loves oil and gas. He doesn't care about the environment. He wants to abolish porn as if that's the biggest crisis facing America. Like, this guy doesn't care about actual living humans, but he wants you to believe he is only in this for life. He cares about life, unless it's IVF, in which case you're evil. By the way, it might help to know that in Oklahoma right now, after the fall of Roe v. Wade, in Oklahoma, all abortions are banned from the moment of fertilization, before people even know they are pregnant, with one exception, when the mother's life is in danger. But as we've seen across the country, who gets to make that decision that the mother's life is in danger? That's in the eye of the beholder. Like, does she have to be on the deathbed for a doctor to be able to step in and not get punished for saving her life at that point? Or does she have to die before Christians are like, well, I guess she could have had one. Oh, well, too late. Now, the state's Republicans have said over and over, our bans on abortion do not apply to IVF procedures because a lot of conservative Christians use IVF. But Dusty Deevers over here wants you to know that when he is in the legislature, he is absolutely going to push to remove that exception. He wants to make sure IVF is punished just like all other pregnancies can be punished. These people only think there's one right way to have a baby, and it's between a man and a woman who are legally married. And I don't know what the legal age is in Oklahoma, but I'm pretty sure it's younger than 18. And they probably can't be related at least too closely. And they can only conceive in the missionary position, I assume. It is so telling that he's all about the health and safety of embryos, but he doesn't care about all the other ways actual humans are hurt, which is so many different ways. Like, he cares more about forced birth than actual life. And here's a perfect example of science finding a way to help families have more kids, which is a thing you would think conservative Christians love. But unless it's done in a way that comports with his interpretation of whatever the Bible says, he is against it. Um, this is a guy who, like I said, he is a pastor. He said he found himself getting more political during the pandemic. Why? Because he was whining about face masks. He was claiming that the government was being tyrannical. Even his whole campaign page, if you go to it, it's all about his faith, not about what he would do for you as his constituents. It's all about how good of a Christian he is. And of course, he said, when the district seat was vacated, it was clear to me that God had been preparing me for this race. Uh, which I'm sure that's what every Christian says about themselves, right? By the way, this guy also said in another appearance recently on his campaign, he wants to see pornography abolished. He wants to see no fault divorce abolished in favor of someone has to be at fault, meaning he wants to make it harder for people to get divorced. And then he said he also wants public shaming for those who are at fault in a divorce, which is wild because, as any married couple who has gotten divorced knows, clearly it's only ever one person's fault, and everyone agrees on who that person is. Like, this guy is insane. And he will be elected on Tuesday to the Oklahoma legislature because Christians elect dudes like this instead of regular people who actually have good ideas. That's Tuesday. If you live in Oklahoma and you're not one of these deranged people who votes for Republicans, like, register to vote. What are you doing? Don't stay home. Vote for whoever the hell the other candidate is. What is wrong with you if you live in this district and are not voting? Because, oh my God, this is a disaster. The last guy, by the way, the guy who vacated his seat, he won the last race with 67% of the vote. So this is a red district. It's Deevers' race to lose. He won't lose it. I mean, he's going to get it. And it's not like Oklahoma could get worse. They're as bad as it gets. But also, when the argument that this guy is making is that Oklahoma isn't radical enough, like, things are going to get bad.